Hi, everybody, and welcome to an online tasting, a very fun online tasting, I think, the first one of 2026. I'm not going to do promotions for all the other stuff that's coming in the next couple months with Murg. You all know Murg, so just go to the website and check out which fun tastings there are. There's a mezcal and tequila tasting. There's an independent movie screening. There's a vintage rum tasting with rums from the 20s and 40s and 50s and 60s in April. So all kinds of fun stuff going on. But tonight, going to talk about dogs and whiskey, I think. And for that, I have invited Mr. Andrew Smith. Welcome, Andrew.
Hiya.
How are you feeling today?
Yeah, it's fine. We've been in the warehouse all day, so it's nice to be out in the cold.
Out in the cold. All right. I'm going to tell you something before I introduce you properly. The why I wanted to do this tasting with you guys with Little Brown Dog Spirits. Last year, well, a couple months ago, you posted a video which was called Whiskey Advert Number 3 or something like that, where you taught people how to drink or how to taste whiskey, which was hilarious. You did an impression of somebody we're not going to name, but a whiskey legend. And I thought that was so funny that immediately after that, I got into touch with you guys to do a tasting. So that's the reason you're here.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
as it happens, we had the good fortune that you weren't on the market in Belgium yet at that moment. But a couple months after, I learned that my other good friend, Jurgen Vromans, the whiskey mercenary, was going to represent you here in Belgium. And then everything was organized very quickly. Jurgen is here too. Hi, Jurgen.
Good evening, guys
Voila.
and girls.
And girls, there's some girls. Yeah. So, Andrew, Little Brown Dog Spirits, what are you guys? Who are you guys? What are you
Yeah.
doing?
Well, first of all, I'll say hi, everybody. Great to see some very familiar faces in the group. The last tasting I did in Belgium would be a while ago. Jan had just had one of his accidents, but that makes it very hard to kind of know what day that is because he's had so many. But he was on a computer screen that day we did it because he was in the hospital. But yeah, it's just great to see some familiar faces, but a lot of new faces as well tonight. So I'll try to not miss things out. But if anyone has got any questions, just please ask. Like I'm very informal with these sorts of things, and I'd far rather that we talk about the sort of things that you're interested in rather than just me witter on about various things. But Little Brown Dog, this is our eighth year now. Still feel like the new boys on the block, but I suppose a lot has happened in the last 8 years. We started 2018 from a garage on at Chris's house. So there's two of us in the company, Chris and myself, and Chris was a farmer, owned a farm, and I was his veterinary surgeon. So it's a completely normal career path in Scotland to go from being a vet to being a whiskey maker. Everybody knows that. Um, and so Chris and I were good friends and didn't really mean to change careers, but he was interested in building a little distillery in the farm. Knew that I had a bit of a reputation for being a bit nerdy about this sort of thing. Had done the degree course for a bit of fun on distilling. And yeah, we kind of, I said, I'll help you get started, but I can't get too involved. And here we are, full time. And we started in Chris's garage. We had enough space for a 10-litre still, one pallet of bottles, one pallet of boxes. And we used to bring one cask at a time up from warehouses to get bottled. I saw, forgive me, I can't remember who it was, but someone's got the first bottle, the Aaron Henk there. That was our first whiskey that we did. I think 2020, I think it was, and it had to be an Aaron. Aaron was the whiskey that really, and you'll see there's a few bottles of Aaron behind me, but that was the one that really kind of made me want to explore more about whiskey. Um, and met some fantastic people. Some of them are in this chat tonight because of that love of Aaron. So the first bottling had to absolutely be an Aaron, but a lot's happened. About 4 years ago, we moved down into the farm itself, and we put up our first warehouse. So we moved the distillery, White Spirits distillery, down into the farm from the garage. Went from a 10 litre still to a 100 and then a 350 litre still. But we put up our first bonded warehouse because one of the frustrations for us using third-party warehousing as an independent bottler, which is the most common way to be an independent bottler, it's not to have your own warehouse, but the delays in getting access to your own stock was massively frustrating. So it would take you 3 or 4 months to get a sample from your own cask, 3 or 4 months if you needed to do a re-rack request. It was then bottled when they could fit it in, not when you felt the whiskey was ready to get bottled, and so on. So when we built our own warehouse, we decided we wanted to make it in such a way that every cask was accessible. So we could probably get 3 or 4 times the number of casks in our warehouse than we can, but we prioritized accessibility to the stock. And we'll talk about that in more ways with some of the different whiskies where it's more appropriate. What's the first dram tonight, Heroin? Is it the Drukit Dug, is it? Or
Yeah, the Juki Dug.
yeah. So like just start with that wee dram and I'll tell you a little bit about it as I tell you about us as well. So you're not just sitting there dying for a drink of whiskey. But the
I'll
first
put
dram
the
tonight,
I'll put the bottle up on the screen while you're talking, Andrew.
oh yeah, that's good. It gets rid of my face. That'd be a help.
Yeah.
Um the Drukit Dug is a blend that we put together and it's not in the same way you would normally try to make a blend. So the whole concept behind this was to try and make sharing whiskey. And that sounds a silly thing to say, but I'm sure many of you on this call tonight, and I know many of you on this call tonight have got a lot of whiskey in your house.
Hmm.
And you've gone quite far down the rabbit hole and you know an awful lot about whiskey. And some of the whiskies that you might enjoy your friends might not manage to drink. We've got you're probably the person that your friends come to ask, oh hey, it's my friend's birthday, I need to buy a bottle of whiskey. What should I buy? Yeah, because they respect that you know a lot, and you want to drink whiskey together with these people. Whiskey is about sharing. I strongly believe that the best whiskeys you'll ever have in your life are whiskeys that you've shared with other people at that time. You might technically have consumed the most fantastic whiskey and it could pass you by because you're sitting by yourself. And don't get me wrong, fortunately, you can't see my desk, but it's piled high with samples. Um, there's a lock on my door so that I can just lock myself in here. And there's some whiskies that I would call sniffing whiskies where you just want to sniff it for an hour and not even have to drink it and just get complete peace and quiet. But that experience is still much better with a couple of friends to say, "What do you think of that? That's fantastic." Just live that experience together. And in Scotland, as in many places, whiskey is this culturally important thing. So that when you've got a big thing happening in your life, a birth, a marriage, a death, whatever, there's a bottle of whiskey on the table in that moment, and the whiskey's not the moment. The whiskey is there to say this is a significant moment. And you might as well drink good whiskey in those times. So we wanted a whiskey that you could, as a whiskey connoisseur or whiskey nerd, or whatever you want to call yourself, could enjoy, but is approachable and isn't going to blow the heads off other people. So we made this whiskey using only casks that have dropped in ABV.
Hmm.
The youngest at this vatting was 9 years old. The oldest was over 40. And it's 45.2%, but that's cask strength. So you're getting the depth, the complexity, the richness of a cask strength whiskey, but something much more approachable, something lighter midweek or a good palate starter for tonight. But I didn't want it to be boring. I didn't want it to be thin. I didn't want it to be just 40% cheap whiskey. It's bloody good whiskey. And the thing is, if you look at it on the label 9-year-old blend, you just ignore it. But it's been hugely popular, this whiskey. It won Best Blend in Scotland last 2024, nearly last year. And the final batch of that will be coming out this year because what we did after we blended that, rather than just leave it in tanks, I put it into quite tired refill casks because I wanted it to be able to continue to oxidize, but I didn't want the profile to change too much. It'd be very easy with a quite subtle whiskey like this to be dominated by oak. So if you put it into first fill casks or a lot of sherry, you're going to lose that honey. You're going to lose the kind of the texture of it, and I didn't want to do that. So it's in quite quiet wood, I would describe it, but it is changing slightly. but I didn't want it to deviate massively from what the original vatting was.
What I was trying to get my head around, Andrew, on this dram was the fact that it's 45.2% and cask strength. But you
Yeah.
said you only on purpose used casks that were lower in ABV.
Yeah, so some of them are pretty close to 40%. Some of them are
Hmm.
a little bit higher, obviously. But again, you think, oh, 9 years old and it's 45%,
Yeah.
that's breathed a lot. It would stagger you, the differences in ABVs in some casks. And a huge amount of that will depend on positioning within the warehouse, the cask type, the density of the oak. So casks on the floor, butts, they tend to be much slower evaporating, but not always.
Hmm.
I was having a conversation with a customer today who we bottled a cask for him. It's only 14 years old. I mean, it was a bourbon barrel, but we only managed to get 160 liters from it. But he'd bought it from a broker and it had been palletized. So losses in palletized casks that are held end to end, they tend to have about 30% higher losses than standard maturation. So although palletizing is popular with the big guys because you can pump in a lot more spirit and wood into a smaller space, um,
You actually lose a lot more.
you're losing a lot more. So there's a
Yeah.
cost beyond the building cost, you know?
Which
Um,
is probably why they only use it for whiskeys that are not meant to age for a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, like even Aaron was speaking to Stuart there, and they were trying to work out the maths to see if it was cheaper to put up another warehouse than it was to
Hmm.
continue to palletize stock since the losses were so high. And you tend to see an accelerated loss in casks like that because as the evaporation happens and the headspace increases, um, you have this thing called the stack effect. So it's like it starts to pull spirit up through the cask like a chimney. So you actually accelerate your losses as they start to happen. But do you know what? It's something I really enjoy about cask strength whiskies that are low in ABV because you're getting a completely different experience than if you taken that whiskey at 50% and watered it down to 45%.
Hmm.
Because what you're not doing is you're not diluting.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're adding water to it, you're thinning out the compounds that are in there that gave that whiskey its texture and its flavor and its body.
Hmm.
So it's not the same experience drinking a diluted whiskey at 45%.
Yeah.
Um, all those heavier compounds within the spirit, they take much longer to break down. So your volatiles tend to go much faster. They're the ones that are got a lower boiling point. They're going to evaporate faster and leave the cask a lot faster. So this might get quite nerdy, and apologies if it is
No,
a
that's the
bit
idea.
nerdy, but
If if
tough.
if I
So
enjoy
you'll be
it,
neat tasting.
I like the nerdy stuff, and if I enjoy it, that's good. So everybody else, I don't care about. So
But
listen,
I think the oxidation of spirit is absolutely key to making a good whiskey. I think it's one of the things that defines Scotch whiskey because we rely heavily on refill wood. The most common cask type in Scotch whiskey is refill wood. And when you only use first fill wood or virgin oak, you don't get the subtlety, you don't get the depth, you don't give the spirit room to do its thing.
Mhm.
When you fill a cask on day one, you've got to think about, is this cask going to be bottled in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years? You've got to think about it at that point, really. Um, and because you're not going to get a first fill sherry hogshead to 30 years without it being just about the wood. You're not going to get an octave to 10 years. And so this kind of mistake that so many people make when they set out in whiskey is thinking that mature whiskey is all about the cask and all about adding color and flavor from the wood. But you've got to let the spirit maturation happen as well.
Mhm.
And if one overtakes the other, it doesn't. That's when you have an imbalance. So if the wood overtakes the spirit, then you're in trouble. That's quite hard to deal with. If the spirit overtakes the wood, that's much easier to deal with, and that is a prime candidate for finishing in that instance.
So I've got a couple questions in the chat already. I also put down there everybody who's in the tasting. If you want to share some tasting notes for the whiskeys, just put them in the chat. Everything we have is good info for Andrew and is fun to read to see what you guys think about it. One of the questions is there grain whiskey in the blend?
Yeah, this is a blended Scotch whiskey. So labeling would be if it was blended malt, it would be a blended malt whiskey, and if it's got any grain, even if it's a teaspoon of grain, it changes category and it becomes just a separate category blended Scotch whiskey. I wish I could give you the exact breakdown of the casks in this. And that's a wee bit tricky because I can tell you a lot about it, but I can't tell you every single detail about it because some of the casks in this were blended stock. So it would have been Edrington or Diageo, and it was going
Mhm.
to end up whatever else. We do these kind of vatted at birth things sometimes. So the components of some of those I don't know exactly. But I do know that some of those casks we'd actually bought to do like a white label blend for other companies because we don't just bottle for ourselves. We decided it was too bloody good and we were keeping it. But we added quite a lot of extra malt to it. So it's about if I assume that the pre-blended stuff is mostly grain, then it's probably about 70 to 80% malt as a blend.
Mhm.
So the kind of a lot of the older components are grain. So the 40-plus-year-old stuff was Invergordon.
Yeah.
There's some North British in there, but there's quite a lot of Clynelish in it. And some of the younger stocks are actually Clynelish. And there's some Belblair, and there's also trying to remember a bit of Glengoyne in there as well. So
Mhm.
plus other bits and bobs, you know.
How
So it
much
was
how much of this have you made? How many bottles were in this batch?
the original vatting was about 16 hogsheads, so just shy of 16 times 250 liters.
Mhm.
So batch one and two, this is batch three you've got here. There's about 3 or 4 hogsheads left of it now, I think. So, yeah, it's it. I just want this to be. I don't want this to be fussy whiskey. I think we're going to go into some much more like intricate whiskies, but I just wanted something that you kind of is fair, that you can enjoy, that you can appreciate, and your friends can drink it with you. Sharing
Chri-
whiskey. Yeah, that's
Chris
it.
Chris just remarked in the chat that according to Whiskey Base, there's 500 bottles of this.
Yeah, there's many things I read in Facebook whiskey based that I'm like, well, that's interesting. It's
Yeah.
not true, but I think there was about 500 bottles to be fair. This one, yeah, I think about right about that. Batch two was probably slightly bigger. I think we decided to be try and get it to 10, so we could do a 10, and that's why we kept some stuff back. Just because 9 and 10, that's a huge difference, obviously, to so many people. It really matters.
Mm.
But yeah, the labels. All of our labels always mean something. So the label is a kind of honeycomb picture because batch two was really, really waxy, honey buttered toast. And this just got a wee bit sweeter, a wee bit richer,
Mhm.
so a wee bit more oak. So we just changed the color because of the honeycomb for that reason. Um, the bottles, when I first started doing this, it was just a hobby. I had no intention of not being a vet anymore. I just really loved whiskey, and we're living in the northeast of Scotland. We're based on the farm in the northeast of Scotland here. About 10 kilometers behind me is Glendronach. About 15 kilometers that way is Ardmore, and about 15 kilometers that way is Glengarry, and just surrounded by distillers and distilleries and neighbors that work in distilleries and the farmers that I used to work with. They all really into their whiskey. They all grow barley for malting. They all buy draft from the distilleries to feed to cows. And some of my best stories I have for these tastings are all from those guys, and the antics that they got up to. But that it's impossible to live here and not get absorbed by it, because 45 minutes from here is Dufton, and when you go up one of the hills around Dufton on a cold day, up say um, Benminnis, and you look down, and every little kind of wee ducat in the ground, there's a wee puff of steam, and it's a distillery. You can't not want to know more about that, I feel, you know. So I used to just do my own cask experiments, build my own casks. I used to give bottles to the staff at Harron as a little gift every year. And I would start to hand etch the bottles. So that's why the bottles look like they do, because that's what I used to do. They're not hand etched anymore. There's far too many bottles to do that these days. But
Maybe this is a good moment to talk about the dog.
yeah,
First of all, why is it called Drukid dog, what does it mean? And then I'll put up a picture of the little brown dog, and then you can talk about where that name comes from.
Yeah, so I mean, the dog thing for me, one of my farmer friends, he some of the best whiskies I've ever had in my life are from him, and he had a lot of buddies in warehouses and used to go and visit them with a sack of tatties and come back with a wine bottle full of amazing whiskey, 1950s Bowmores and 60s Mortlicks and all sorts of crazy stuff. And he used to put me labels on his bottles that said the Capercaillie collection. And he would give me a bottle of this every now and then. I would calve a cow or something like this, and it's like this 64 Black Bowmore. You think that I've got to share this with people. I've got to share this with my friends. So I would split it up into little bottles and give them little minis or whatever else. And I started putting my own wee labels with the dog. That's Mark II dog, but the original little brown dog, her name was Banksy, and she came with me to all the farms, but she also came with me to all the distilleries. And she's been to more distilleries than a lot of people ever have. So I thought, well, I'll name it after her. And it was also a kind of wee nod to the copper dog, the kind of whiskey thief, because some of these whiskies that really got me thinking, God, I need to drink more of this. Well, I shouldn't have had them. So they were definitely liberated from warehouses. You've heard of the angel share, but we've got some right ugly looking hairy angels going around Aberdeenshire. Um, but yeah, so the Druket Dug, the reason it's called that is because the ABV is lower, and Druket's a very good Scottish word meaning not just wet, but absolutely soaking wet. Like Druket, absolutely Druket. But also, like there's a lot of this a sense of humor in what we do because it's very easy when you start talking about cis and trans oak lactones and stack effect in casks and all these things that you get a bit pretentious. So we never want it to be like unapproachable. We want whiskey to be something that fun because I'm working with my best mate doing something I absolutely love doing. We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun. And we drink whiskey with our friends and for ourselves because it's enjoyable and we want to enjoy doing it and we want to have fun. And we often felt that that aspect of whiskey had been taken away and replaced with fancy watches and fancy cars and being seen to be drinking fancy whiskies. And that's just not really what we're about. So there's a pub in the town where my gran lives. My gran lives in a town about half an hour outside Glasgow. It's not what you're going to see in a picture postcard, right? And the pub at the bottom of the hill is this absolute shithole pub, and it's called the Druket Dug. So I thought it'd be very funny to name a very premium whiskey after this shithole pub. I did drive past it one day and saw a man running out, getting chased out with a guy with a shotgun, which is quite exciting. So yeah, I thought that stuck with me. That's a good name for a whiskey, that. Um, but also when you explain it out loud to people, especially that aren't Scottish, what Druket dog means, they go, wet dog. I'm like, yeah, it's not a tasting note. Yeah.
Cool. Maybe it's time we have people have their second dram.
Yeah.
Now for this one, I wasn't really sure what to put on the label, and I think I put Glengarry on the label, but I don't know if I was actually supposed to.
No, it's not a secret. This is Glengarry.
Okay.
Have you got a picture of this one?
Yeah, I'll put it up. There you go, because also the bottle is different.
There's a story to the bottle here. So I think obviously being on the go for a wee while now, I think one of the proudest things we ever did was win Independent Bottle of the Year, 2024. Didn't expect that to happen so early in our careers. But it certainly put us on the map for quite a few people and markets. But one of the difficulties is that for a long time, a lot of our bottles sell out very quickly, and you might not get hold of one, or you might get manage to get one, but you can't buy another bottle. And we want to try and grow our little company, and so we can look after the health of the business and buy more casks and make better whiskies. But I didn't want to do that just by pumping out more and more single casks. I think the danger is that you start to focus on numbers rather than quality, and that's not something we want to do. I think we sometimes can be a bit frustrating for businesses to work with because we don't commit to X number of casks per quarter. It's literally these are the ones that we've got that we think should get bottled now, and it might be six or it might be three, it might be one. It's just in that moment in time, that's what we're enjoying and we think is good. Um, so just to try and keep pumping out more and more of those things, I think you're at risk of letting the quality drop a wee bit. You bottle things for just because you need to get the numbers out there. But what we did do is because we are just down the road from Glengarry, so my house is about 20 kilometers from the distillery. So we're about 10 kilometers from Glengarry Distillery at the farm. We've got a very good relationship with the guys there and access to some amazing stock. So there's a lot of good Glengarry in our warehouse. We exist as a company because of the farm and the location. I got into whiskey because of Aberdeenshire, or more so. We can do what we can do because of the farm, and we're proud to be in the northeast of Scotland. So we wanted to make something that was of the northeast of Scotland. And one of my favorite things about our job in terms of bottling single cask whiskies is finding these little gems, the things that need to be pulled out and say, well, actually, that's quite special and that should get bottled. We've got 10 casks that are all the same, but this number 6 here is better than the other ones. And that's fantastic. But I wanted to try and see what we could do in terms of building a whiskey and not just make batch one, but make batch two and batch three and hopefully whatever after that. Um, and so for us, it's a different challenge in terms of whiskey making, but it allows us to kind of put a bit more of our character or our preferences into a whiskey because single cask whiskey is so unique. It's never repeatable. Even if you try very, very hard, there's always going to be its own DNA. And so like this for me is a very old-fashioned style of Highland whiskey, unpeated. It's 60% first fill bourbon casks, and the first fill is super important in that statement. And then 40% sherry, and the sherry is made up of first fill, refill, Oloroso, and PX. So the body of the whiskey is coming from the first fill bourbon. It's giving it the texture, and then but it's not just dominated by bourbon. You've got that extra sweetness and that extra richness from the sherry, but it's not a sherry bomb either. It's deliberately not one or the other. I like how the whiskey gave. I think we've all got whiskies that you come back to and you get something different, and that experience of the whiskey is changed by your mood, what you had for dinner, what the weather's doing, and I feel whiskies like this can give you a better chance of that. We sometimes see it in single cask whiskies that are, every time you come to it, you get something different, and I really enjoy that. And I think one of the whiskies we're going to try tonight is a bit like that as well. But yeah, it's no secret that it's a Glengarry, but we didn't want to call it a 12-year-old Glengarry because you can go and buy a 12-year-old Glengarry. This is very different whiskey. Texturally, the way that it feels when you drink it, and the flavor profile, it's genetically Glengarry, but it's a different whiskey. And whiskey making is not just about distilling. Whiskey making is about everything and pulling it together. And we talk about celebrated whiskey makers, the master blenders, the Rachel Barrys, the Billy Walkers, and everybody else of this world. They're not, well, maybe Billy is a wee bit, but most folk aren't operating the stills. They're given whiskey in cask, and they make the final product from that, and that's really what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, it's actually funny that you mentioned Billy Walker because I did a podcast with him a year and a half ago, and the first question in the podcasts I do is always, "Who are you?" And I let people introduce themselves, and he just said, "I am a whiskey maker," and he stopped. That was everything he had to say. So,
but that's exactly what he is, and he's a very, very respected whiskey maker.
Yeah.
So like it's fun to see how you can make something that should sound on paper the same as a 12-year-old Glengarry, but is quite different. And I'm quite proud of the whiskey that we've made here. I'm excited about it though because we're really excited about it actually because we're just desperate to get the bloody stuff out, right? So that bottle that you see in the picture was born out of frustration. The liquid was ready, the blending was done, We had been talking to a bottle manufacturer for far too long about a design, and it was dragging on and dragging on and dragging on. To give you an idea, we've been talking since May last year to somebody about this bottle and
Wow.
trying to get samples and trying to get things done. And and in the end, we thought, bugger it. We've got a little black book where we write all of our ideas. So since the very, very first flasks of spirit that we sold, there's always been a drawing and an idea and whatever in that book. So I just tore a page out of the book, wrote what I wanted on it, and we redacted the cask types in the Glengarry because we wanted folk just to judge it on the liquid alone. We wanted them to think, you know what, like, what am I getting from this? Um, and stuck it on a tall round, which is of course, the famous old-fashioned style of whiskey bottle, just to get the liquid out there. And we joke a wee bit. I mean, again, everything we do is tongue in cheek. So the first 500 bottles, certainly in the UK, and the ones we had for the UK market sold out in 2 days. And so I think there's still a chance to get some in Belgium and Netherlands. But you often see these whiskey makers, proper people, real whiskey makers, put the signatures on the bottle because they've earned that after a long, long time. And we haven't earned the right to do that yet, but we did it for fun as a joke on the pre-production release.
Yeah.
Because it was like, we're sharing our working, we're sharing our thought process with you. But my name, Andrew Smith, head of thinking, Chris Reed, head of doing. It's the way we decide. It's the way the labour kind of breaks up between us. When I'm swanning about doing whiskey tastings, Chris is in the bottling room, bottling whiskey and everything else like that. So he's very, very practical. He built the distillery, he built the warehouses. I do the cask picking and everything else. So that kind of relationship between the two of us works pretty well. If I was left to me to build our office or our distillery, it'd be like a shanty town made out of pallets.
I actually really like this one, Andrew, and I see some nice tasting notes in there in the chat, like lemon, dark chocolate, pudding, though more citric notes, fruity, touch of ginger. And I also like the fact that it's bottled at 46%, that you didn't feel the need to do it at cask strength. So
Yeah, I mean, we want like cask strength whiskey is a fantastic thing, and we all enjoy it. And I will always bottle our single casks at cask strength, even on the occasions where I feel the whiskey is better at a lower ABV, because I want you to have the choice. And I strongly believe that this whiskey is for a bigger audience. We want to be able to give a taste of what Little Brown Dog do to people that are whiskey curious rather than going to spend €100 on a single cask bottle at cask strength. So dropping the ABV just keeps the tax down a wee bit, but I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing it below 46%. For two reasons. One, you're going to have to chill filter below 46%. Certainly at 40%, you have to chill filter or it's going to go hazy in the bottle. And you're going to lose all that texture and all the fattiness, especially from the first full wood. But also, like, I think it drinks well at 46%. I think
Mhm.
it's a nice ABV. It's one, again, it's a social whiskey then. You can have a few of them with your friends and you're not getting a bit squiffy. Whereas when you're drinking 60% whiskies, you gotta watch it a wee bit. Even the more experienced of you in this chat, I'm sure, have left some tastings with some rosy cheeks in the past. I know I have. So that's the reason for the 46%, but I say not chill filtered. And we are so close now to getting the actual bottles out, the proper ones, and I'm looking forward to it. We were going around people today with two label designs and saying which do you prefer. So that's the stage we're at with it. But I just want to get the liquid out there, and that bottle was all about just getting the liquid out there. I think unfortunately that bottle backfired because folk were buying it just for the label alone.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not the point.
Yeah,
You're
it is
supposed
a
to drink
fun
the bloody
label.
stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is
But
a lot
uh,
of fun. This one, yeah.
but Chris, I see Chris saying he's not normally a fan of Glengarry, but this one's interesting, so thank you.
Mhm.
But like I think Glengarry is definitely one of the distilleries you want to keep an eye on. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening there. So they recommissioned the malt floors about 4 or 5 years ago now. Actually helped a friend with that. And you know, we were expecting them to see a drop in yield. So when you're measuring yield in whiskey making, you're looking at the liters of pure alcohol that you get per ton of barley. Okay. And so we were expecting it to be maybe a 10% drop. but they're actually getting the same as the commercial barley and making a better spirit. The other thing they did was they went back to direct firing of the wash still. And it was not a smooth process for them because Forsyth got the calculations wrong and they actually melted the I-beam and Glengarry Distillery is right in the middle of this tiny wee village. It's like very historic, like 600-year-old village.
It's called Old Meldrum or something like that.
Old Meldrum, that's
Yeah.
right. And you could drive through Old Meldrum and not even notice it's there because it's all hidden behind the houses. But if that still had collapsed, there'd be like 40,000 litres of wash just going down the high street, you know? The other thing that amuses me about this distillery is that behind it is where the alcoholics clinic is. Like
Behind
the
it.
worst place to put one of those things. Um, but yeah, because they do the direct fire wash still, and they've got the floor malting now in place. We're kind of telling folk that it's the spring bank of the northeast of Scotland, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that we've got a lot of Glengarry in our warehouse.
Yeah. You're thinking about the future already.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. No, I really like it. And so if I understood correctly, so now you've put out 500 bottles. That's also why it's called work in progress. I saw on the label
Yeah,
somewhere.
pre-production, whatever, I can't remember what we called
Pre-production
it, but yeah,
preview, yeah.
yeah,
But so
that's the one. That's one.
and then the next ones will be in a different bottle, and also be slightly different liquid than
It's the same liquid. It's
same
the
liquid.
exact
Yeah, yeah.
same liquid. So batch one will be that, but we'll, there's a bit of re-racking that comes into these things. So some of it's full maturation in the sherry, but some of it goes into sherry. Um, I've got next year's release ready in wood now, and then the year after as well. So it's quite a commitment in terms of casks, but I think I hope we can do something good with it. I hope you guys enjoy it, really do. But yeah, it's something I'm excited about getting out into the bigger world. And this was about getting the liquid out there because that's the most important part. The label, the bottle, can all bugger off. The whiskey's the important part.
Yeah. Jurgen, do you still have some of this left for Belgium, or is everything out in the market already?
I think we still have one or two cases, so not much left.
Okay. Yeah. So if your local shop doesn't have it, they have to call Jurgen to get it then
Quickly.
quickly. All right. No, very cool. There's also an anti-alcohol clinic in Belgium in the town of Bierbeek, which is translated as the river of beer. Betty is saying
Yeah.
so. Yeah. No, really nice. If there's no more questions, maybe we should go on to the next one. What do you
Cool.
feel like? I think that was the Secret Highland.
Yeah, so we don't like secrets at LBD, so it's a clean leash.
Yeah.
And we'll just get that out of the way straight away. I think we try really hard to share the process with people, like the cask types, the distillery types, fermentation times, all these things. If you're interested in that, we want to talk about it. The very, very least I can tell you is the name of the bloody distillery. So it frustrates me when we don't get to tell you the name of the distillery. So we will drop subtle clues. So here's a picture of the bottle just outside Clynelish Distillery with a Clynelish cat in the background. And the label for this one is a bunch of cats, but they're not wild cats. They're semi-domesticated cats because it's tamed. We can't call it Clynelish, Nonsense. Why can't I call it Clynelish? It's crazy. I don't always understand why some things are secret and some things aren't. We're about to do another secret space side. And because we've done about three now, so each time we want to give it a slightly different name so that you don't think it's the same distillery. So the first secret space side we did was an unnamed with a giant M space side. And it was we called it our LBD extra value range, and it was a 13-year-old single PX cask Macallan, plain white label. And we also put the what three word coordinates of the distillery on there as well. This one has the what three word coordinates on the back label. Unfortunately, due to a miscommunication between myself and the printers and autocorrect on my phone, it's not quite right. The what three word coordinates on the back of this label.
This one says overheard trial rivals.
Yes, well, it should be overhead.
Overhead.
Because if you put, do you know what three words is? We seen it?
I
Yeah.
know it. I don't know if everybody knows it.
So it's an app. It splits the whole world up into 3 meter by 3 meter squares,
I'll put it on the screen while you're talking about it.
and each 3 meter by 3 meter square is coded by three words and a unique, each square. So if you get the letter slightly wrong, it doesn't give you Clynelish Distillery. It gives you some random place in Alaska. And I was like, oh shit, that's a bit bad because we didn't notice until after we'd got the labels printed and they're on the bottles. Um, and Chris was like, oh, don't worry. I don't think anybody ever looks these things up. And we had about 20 emails from people saying, oh, that's somewhere in Alaska. Yeah. So I think this is the wrong address, this one.
This is the wrong one, yeah.
Yeah.
And so
You click
this
if you click on
is
that bit that you're on if you click it,
I have to click. I have to click here.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's not Clynelish Distillery. But yeah, like there's some cat. So like the Glenrothes we're about to bottle. I understand why it's a secret safe Speyside. So we've called it a super secret Speyside, because it was a complicated history for a long time with Glenrothes. So the distillery was owned by Edrington Group, but the single malt bottling rights was owned by Berry Brothers. So you can understand why you couldn't call it a Glenrothes. Um, we did a Glenlivet, and we called it our very secret Speyside. Because if you just call it a secret Speyside, everyone just thinks you're talking about Glenfarclas. Um, but for the Glenlivet, we made a video of us driving around Speyside, changing all the road signs from Glenlivet to very secret. Again, we don't like secrets. But yeah, Clynelish. This is not single caskets. So you'll see on our labels at the bottom, it'll say single cask if it's single cask. It'll say small batch if it's more than one cask, or if, and we're quite strict with this, if it's been finished. So if you change a cask type, if you go from bourbon to sherry or sherry to bourbon or first fill to refill even, or other way around, that technically isn't single cask whiskey anymore.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people in the industry that have yet to realize this or choose to ignore it, maybe. Um, but it's technically speaking. So even if the liquid all came from one cask, if you change the cask type, it's not single cask anymore. So you'll see it says small batch if it's more than one cask or if it's been finished. This hasn't been finished. This is full maturation in two bourbon hogsheads. And we put the two casks together. I think roughly about 400 bottles from the two casks. You can now get our bottles in about 8 international markets as well as the UK. So doing that just means that we get to share out a wee bit more. And the two casks actually complemented each other together when they were put together as well. So that was another reason to consider doing it. Um, but just like a quite a bourbon forward style of Clynelish,
Hmm.
but not dominated by the wood. I think we talk about balance in whiskey a lot, and balance is one of the hardest things to get in really small batch or single cask whiskey. You know, balance can be achieved by blending. To an extent, you can get balance in a single malt, but you're pulling your flavor profiles narrower. And then you look at single cask and you're like this. So balance is one of these things that's really hard to get. But I don't think that when you talk about balance, you're talking about it what uniquely across all distillery types. So for me, that balance point between spirit and wood will change depending on the distillery character. So
Hmm.
some whiskies, I think you have to be much more toward the spirit style for it to work. Some other whiskies you can push much, much more into wood. So something like a Royal Brackler or whatever else, you can really get a lot more wood and it works. Fine leash for me, I like in the middle. I like to experience the spirit character, but I like it backed up by a bit of wood as well.
Is
And
is there one of the two that you prefer, like more spirit driven or more cask driven?
No, it's totally dependent on this on the distillery.
Hmm.
So like Kalila, I could drink it off the still. It doesn't need to see a cask.
Hmm.
But there's so much you can't go wrong with Kalila. I think you'd have to work really hard to make a bad Kalila. Whereas something like a Glenelgin or um, something more delicate like a Manic Moor, I feel that it's very easy to just kill that whiskey dead.
Hmm.
Um, Older whiskies, like you've had so much oxidation of the spirit and that beautiful kind of tropical fruit thing that only comes from 25, 30 years plus in refill wood. They're not always the darkest whiskies. And so you see a lot of people finishing these whiskies, it just kills them dead. The old Glenglasser 30-year-old in the teardrop bottle. It's
Hmm.
all finished in first fill Oloroso. It was a bloody nice whiskey. But if you tasted some of those whiskies in the refill bourbon that were a bit peely wally, just so much more elegant, just so much more going on. Um, and there's a lot of pressure because whiskey's become such a visual thing. There's a lot of very good whiskey out there, and despite your best efforts, you're not going to be able to drink it all and taste it all and smell it all. But you'll see a lot of photographs on Facebook of whiskies you'll never drink or taste, and the only thing you can comment on is what it looks like. And so you see these people getting really excited about dark whiskies and going, look at the color of that.
Mm.
Um, like some of the worst whiskies I've ever had have been these really dark whiskies. Because when we get excited about sherry bombs and we're thinking of all the rich fruit that comes with that dark color, many of these sherry casks are extremely active casks. They're almost virgin oak casks. They've maybe been seasoned for 2 years with a sherry that is then undrinkable when it comes out of the cask. Um, they're still very astringent. There's a lot of tannins in the oak, especially European oak, where it's much more spicy. You can just get a very spicy mess with some of these whiskies, and that's not what I would enjoy. Um, and then this isn't being finished, but when we talk about finishing whiskies, it's always about trying to kind of select the right whiskey to start off with. You're not trying to drag some maturity into a very green whiskey because you're just going to get a lot of new make spirit, green notes sitting on top of a lot of wood and no integration. It's why I don't like a lot of these little octave casks in new distilleries where it's just raw spirit and a shit ton of wood, and it's not whiskey. Um, but equally, I don't want it just to be chucking in stuff to make it colorful and make it dark and make it sell. We never do that.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's picking stuff that's been spirit mature. It's done its oxidative maturation. It's breathed, and we would call those casks spirit mature but wood immature. And they typically would be something like a refill hogshead because that is the most common cask type in Scotland. And if you're making a blend of whatever, you don't care. 3-year-old doesn't matter. Bang it all in. It's reached its minimum age requirement. Let's color it, chill filter it. The caramel coloring will take some of the edge off it. Don't worry. That's not what whiskey making is for us. So those casks, you can make a bloody amazing whiskey with it. We bottled up in Rinnis a few years ago that we were not expecting much from, but as soon as we opened that cask and you tasted it, my smile just came up because that is the best whiskey you can have as a young independent bottler because you can just stick it straight into glass. Doesn't need anything else, doesn't need any special treatment, doesn't need any expensive casks. It's just really good whiskey. And I would call those casks almost unspecially selected as a bit of a joke because you don't do anything about it. You let you go, that's
Hmm.
good, stick it in the bottle. But most of these refill casks, you either have to think much more long term or you're looking at finishing if it's needing because the wood has got nothing left to give. There's no more compounds in that wood that can be extracted. And some of these casks are 30, 40, 50 years old, but the spirits in them is 9, 10, 12 years old.
What I'm
Um,
what I'm what I'm starting to understand with Little Brown Dog Spirits, Andrew, as we're talking about the whiskeys and tasting them, is that despite your being a young independent bottler and despite your being a little bit rebellious and doing stuff differently than all the others do, you're actually quite an old school bottler.
yeah. Listen, we joke like our tagline I think is like traditionally unconventional. I think we call
Yeah.
ourselves. Um, and but like you can't break the rules of whiskey. The reason we all love whiskey is because the rules are very, very strict, so you get a good product. And when other countries don't follow the same rules and the trust isn't there, you don't get the same reputation. There's amazing world whiskies, and I'm the biggest advocate of many of them. But when you start to play fast and loose with the truth and the facts, then folk don't trust it the same way as they trust Scotch whiskey.
Hmm.
The rules are very strict, but despite that, we can make 1,000 different whiskies, and I absolutely love that. But you've got to think about it. You got to understand the process, and you've got to, to make the whiskey you want to make. And so you have to be traditional in certain aspects. But what you don't have to be is exclusive and up your own backside and exclude people that otherwise might enjoy the spirit. I feel that a lot of whiskeys in the last 10 years forgot that you were supposed to drink the bloody stuff. And they excluded people that loved their whiskies and bought their whiskies and drank their whiskies, and they can't get them now. They've got to book an appointment to get a shot in the coffee shop, you know. But we're not selling ornaments here; we're selling whiskey for drinking. So
Yeah, it's just something that pops in my head is these are like armchair whiskeys for people that don't necessarily have an armchair. Something like that. That just sit in the kitchen and have the whiskey because it's just good whiskey, but you don't need the whole armchair and the fire burning and stuff like that. Like the
yeah,
very
yeah. I mean,
old
there's
school
something
stuff.
quite nice about that as well.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
get me
I
wrong.
love that, but yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But you'll notice the stag's head here has got a fez on it and a Franz Ferdinand scarf. So
It's like the
uh,
Tommy Cooper.
I got that off a guy. They lived in this huge big country estate house, and they had hundreds of these bloody things in his house. But like many of these old estate houses, the roof was falling in, and they couldn't afford to look after it anymore. So he moved to a little bungalow a few miles in the road from here, and he had a few horses. That's how I got to know him. But he had this bungalow with about 100 stags' heads in it, and I was like, "That's quite impressive." He's like, "Do you want one?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I got a stag's head. It's quite
That's
cool.
cool. That's cool. We've got some tasting notes for the Kleinlich, which I adore. Again, beautiful dram with some nice fruity notes, a touch of light custard. It lingers for a long time, and then some fresh touch, some mintiness. Hank is
Mm.
getting. Don't
I
know
think
if
the mint is the oak tannins. I think to a wee bit, I always like trying to understand where the flavors are coming from and trying to kind of work that out. And sometimes it's easier than others.
Mhm.
But I was doing a tasting in Glasgow a few weeks ago, and there was some Swedish guys that were just over visiting, and they'd been tasting their own cask samples, and they had some pretty funky Benevises that we're trying to make less funky. So it's about trying to understand, like, is that coming from the wood or is that coming from the distillate? And I was pretty sure it was coming from the wood. So, if it's tannin based, then what can we do in terms of allowing that to break down? Because think can we go a wee bit nerdy again? Do you want to
Yeah,
go a
yeah,
wee bit?
yeah. Go ahead, man. Yeah.
So like one of my favorite subjects is the sort of chemistry of whiskey, right? And what happens in different environments in a cask. So you think, you've got a good idea we're going to get from a bourbon cask versus a sherry cask and everything else, right? But sometimes there's little surprises. And we did a Glenlivet a while ago, and it was a refill bourbon barrel. And it tasted like coconut, like so coconutty. I called it a Grand Cru Malibu, It was like so coconutty. And refill casks should not have coconut in them because coconut is a cis oak lactone and it's super soluble in alcohol. So when you put your whiskey in for the first time, first fill bourbon, well, that sucks up there, and when you bottle it, it's all gone. So you put it in. Now, so you shouldn't have that in a refill cask. But what can happen is that cis-oak-lactone is a breakdown of lignin. And lignin is one of the main components in a wood. And normally you get that flavor in the cask when you use it for the first time because you've charred the cask, you break down the lignin, it breaks down into cis and trans-oak-lactones, and then you get this thing. But lignin itself is preserved in alcohol. So that breakdown process won't usually happen in cask. But as the volume in the cask drops down, and as the oh my god, stop googling.
Yeah.
So you get the more of a headspace with air, but also as that ABV starts to drop down, you can get this like secondary lignin degradation and a second flush of this compound. So if the oak was particularly high in it, then you can get this. So like that for me was just like so cool to have that,
Yeah, these are the nice
And,
surprises you can get.
and
Yeah.
that's what I love about single cask whiskies. You can tell the story of that thing happening, that kind of obscurity, that little extra thing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Very nice Kleinlich. I love it. I hear from Jurgen that it's all sold out in Belgium. So
it was pretty well priced, and
yep.
because if we spend less per cask, you get the bottle cheaper. And we're not about what's the most we can charge for this. We literally what do we have to physically charge for this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because we want folk to be able to open the bottles, But
Absolutely.
yeah, I didn't hang around in the UK either, that one, but it was good fun, and it's great. It's great to share it and get folk to drink it.
Yep.
And,
We're
and also, we're talking
half.
a lot of random stuff. So if you guys have got questions, please put them in the chat, and
I
we'll
think at the
go through them.
moment there's no questions in the chat or not many, not many.
Yeah,
So yeah, feel free, guys. And otherwise, we'll just move on to the next one, I think, which is the Longmorn.
yeah. Oh, I mean, right.
I'll
This is
put
a
it
good
on
one.
the
I love
screen
this
for you.
whiskey. I love this whiskey. It's the as bottlers, we get lists of casks every week. I'll probably get about 5 or 6 cask lists a week. I'm not buying 5 or 6 cask lists of whiskey every week. We haven't got the funds to do that. But I read every single one of them, and so I feel I've got a pretty strong experience over the last 10 years of what the market's doing and what's available and what's out there. Longmorn is something that does not come up very often at all. I've got one cask supplier who's given me all my weirdest little gems. So the chain peer that we bottled, there was only ever 40 casks of chain peer ever distilled. We bottled one of them. It came from the same supplier as this cask. And it's been in my warehouse now for about 2 or 3 years. And everybody that's come to visit, I'm like, you've got to try this. Like I just think it's so crazy. Um, the if I tell you about the label, that might explain because I don't like giving folk tasting notes at whiskey tastings. I think we've all got different experiences, we've all got different palates, we all feel differently about things, and we've got different reference points. And we've grown up in different parts of the world, and so if I talk about a certain biscuit or sweet, you might not have ever tried that. But I found so much butter on this whiskey that we put a label that looked a bit like Lurpak. And I say very, very vaguely looked a bit like Lurpak because I don't want Lurpak trying to sue me. We made a we had a
Which brand is that, Andrew? Wait, I
it's
just didn't
Aldi's
get.
own brand, Dan Pack or Norpak, or
Oh,
whatever it
yeah,
was they
okay,
called.
yeah, yeah.
We did a 30-year-old Strathclyde last year that tasted just like milk chocolate, marshmallow, and biscuit. And if anyone's ever been to Scotland, you'll have seen a little Tunnock's tea cake. It's like a little biscuit with marshmallow and milk chocolate. It's got a very distinctive wrapper that's red and silver stripes. And so we when I often go around the world, I'll bring a wee pack of Tunnock's tea cakes to give to people as a wee taste of Scotland. And we thought, oh, let's put the label a little bit like that. Well, it was all going very well, and then about 2 months later, we got a letter from their lawyers um, saying, and they thought that we were using tea cakes to make whiskey. It's like, well, that's not actually how you make whiskey. And it's like we only did it as a love letter to your biscuits. Plus, it's a single cask and it's all gone, so you don't have to worry about it. But but yeah, it's so I didn't want to fall out with Lurpak, but there's so much goes on in this whiskey, and I said that there's some whiskies you come back to, um, and you get something different each time. But one of the reasons I love Longmorn, even though obviously it's not something I get a chance to get my hands on very often, it's such a high ester spirit. And there's a lot of lactones in this, so you get that kind of buttery kind of thing going on. Very fruity, very tropical. I think there's so much going on. Yet it's a very pale whiskey, and
Hmm.
I think it helps to prove my argument that dark whiskey does not mean good whiskey necessarily. That you can have amazing whiskies that are kind of pale. Certainly, this is the one, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. But I never take it personally if you don't. But when we've done the tastings out in the Netherlands before Christmas, this was the one that a lot of folk got very excited about as well. So um, quite high ABV. It's just shy of 60%. Um, but I think it drinks well despite that. I don't think you don't think you need to add water to it to enjoy it. But it does open up with a bit of things. And as the full level comes down in the bottle with time, it just changes so much as well. So you often find that with these quite high ABV whiskies is that they really evolve in the bottle too.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah. But I see like even better with 2 drops of water. I mean, I think I agree with you there, but like I like you having the chance to go and explore it. I think it's nice to to sometimes when you're drinking a whiskey for the first time to kind of explore it to destruction. So just see, taste and add and taste and add and see what happens. And as you add more water, you get more cask influence, and and less the spirit influence. So it's a really good way to evaluate whiskies and see there's not any off notes or any kind of nasties that are hidden from the cask influence, you know?
I don't know if it's because you mentioned the word esters, but I'm all the way into the rum world now when I'm drinking this. Uh,
Yeah.
like agricole vegetable
I
rum
I think
stuff
you
like
could
that.
almost convince somebody that there was a rum potentially, you know?
Yeah.
I think we've done that we did a Foursquare, and I think you could tell people that it was an old grain that had been finished in a rum cask, and they would believe you, you know?
Mhm. Jürgen, béarnaise sauce as a tasting note. That's quite good.
Oh, I like that. Because there's a kind of sharpness to it as well, you know? So, and battery, I'm like, cool, yeah. I get that. Like the lactic thing, the lactic acid
Hmm.
thing is definitely there, and Uh, I don't know. That's something I seek out in certain whiskies. I think I really enjoy it when you find it. I think it's one of the reasons I love Kilkerran. It's one of the reasons I love Bruichladdich, is you often get it in some of those distillates as well.
Hmm.
But for me, this is about distillate forward whiskey. But it's not, it's first fill bourbon cask as well. So we often talk to a lot of people about whiskey, and they say, especially when we talk about really interesting distillates, like maybe a distillery has used an ancient grain, like a beer barley or a golden promise or something like that. They say, "Oh, I'm glad that they put it into um, bourbon cask because then you can taste the whiskey." Well, the bourbon's giving as much influence as a sherry cask, really. It's just that sometimes you can see through that a wee bit more to get to the spirit
Hmm.
behind. Um,
What I love is the tasting notes that are coming up here are all in all directions. Because
yeah,
Evelyn is now saying it's very Burgundy style wine with white tea notes. We've had
that kind
the
of
vegetal.
the mineral notes to it.
Yeah,
Um, I would say as well, if you don't drink the whole sample, but I don't know how much of a sample you've got,
it's
but
2 cl.
come back to it tomorrow night, and it'll be different again.
Yeah, that was also something that you were saying earlier, and that's something I always tell in tastings too. And I compare it to I always tell people that buying a bottle of whiskey is not buying a record, but it's buying like 25 tickets to a live show. And
Oh,
it
that's fantastic! I'm stealing that from now on.
Ah,
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
memory.
It's my copyright, but no, but I mean, every time you've got a different experience. It's the same thing, but it's always different. So
Yeah, absolutely. And like going to a gig, the venue changes it, and the audience,
yeah.
like I oh, there's some. I really enjoy doing the whiskey festivals and seeing people and all those things like that, but like it's not always the best environment to appreciate a whiskey. Um, and I would say the whiskey festivals I've been to on the continent tend to be much better behaved. Uh, some of the ones in Glasgow, and so on a bit more like a rammy. I mean, we went to Falkirk Whiskey Festival one year, and Falkirk again is not one of these places that appears on the Visit Scotland website. Um, and the way I describe it to people is it was like the beginning 30 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. There were medics carrying people out by the armpits and screams for help. Um, but
That
but
was the beginning of the festival.
yeah, it was like
Yeah.
it was wild. We had two sessions to do, and they were still removing the crying, vomiting people before the start of the second one. And I'm like, I'm not ready for the second session. And but halfway through the second session, it just completely emptied. Everybody just went home because the football was on. It was very weird. And Glasgow's grown up a lot. I hadn't been to Glasgow Whisky Festival for a few years, and then I went. We were actually working on it this year, and it was much more civilized. Whereas before, it used to be described as an all-you-can-drink buffet, and there'd just be glasses getting over everybody's shoulders and asked to get filled up with the most expensive one. It's moved on from that now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, we I love it, and I think it's a great way to meet people and taste loads and loads of different whiskies. But it's not always the best environment to experience more subtle whiskies, things that need time in the glass. Because there's some things that we bottle that are fantastic straight out of the bottle, but there's some that you'll get it even better after 30 minutes in the glass or whatever else. So
Are you at the Independent Spirits Festival in Edinburgh?
we will be there. I was gutted to miss it last year, but Chris and my brother were there for us last year. But I'm going to be there this year. and I'm looking forward to it. So some of you guys coming over?
Yeah, we've got a group of 8 people, and we're coming over. So a couple
Very
of them
good.
are in the session here. So,
Well, come and say hi.
we
We'll have a
will.
few jams.
Yeah. What if we wear a fez?
Well, that's a North Star Spirits Fest that
Oh,
it's
okay.
wearing. So we don't have any. You know what I love about this industry is how collaborative it is and how friendly it is. You know, and independent bottling as well. I think it was if anyone's seen the series on independent bottlers, there's something that somebody said that really stuck out for me. In that was that in theory we're all competitors, and we're competing at every level. We're competing for the same casks. We're competing for the customers and the export markets and everything else. But we help each other so much. And Ian Croucher, North Star, has been amazing. David Stark, that runs the festival, has done so much to help us as a company. He helped set up our first warehouse, Claxton's first warehouse. Um, our importer in Sweden imports us, Claxton's, Watt Whiskey, and North Star, and the link there is David Stark. It's fantastic, and we do a little bit with the gin, and our approach to gin is very much a whiskey maker's gin. We were so fed up as people that believe in how strict the rules are in Scotch whisky to see those being run roughshod by gin producers who were calling themselves after an island in Scotland, and their gin was being distilled just outside Birmingham. You can't do that with Scotch whisky. Um, so the first gin we made was called Project AFG, which stood for another fucking gin, because every week they felt there was another fucking gin. But can't remember what I'm telling you. But yeah, because like there's that level of collaboration isn't the same with the gin producers. They're all
Mm.
looking over each other's shoulders. And we found that quite odd. We wanted to work with people and maybe combine together to cut costs or whatever else. But yeah, but whiskey's very friendly and I love it. And I hope it stays that way.
For everybody that's in the session and that doesn't know the documentary that Andrew is talking about, the Independent Spirits 4-part docu film, we're actually having an event with that on the 18th of March. We're showing the first of the documentary on a large screen with some tasting. We've got people from Compass Box and Berry Brothers over to have some tastings. And actually, the director of the documentary from LA is also coming to Belgium
Oh.
for that session. So
Well, I'd say skip episode 1 because we're not in it, but 2, 3, and 4 we're in it, so they're the best ones.
yeah,
But the opening credits, the documentary, you'll see a hill. That's our distillery, and then you'll see Chris pushing casks from the warehouse into the bottling line, with the dogs running past, and that's in the credits each episode as well. So we're famous now. So.
fantastic. Fantastic. I think everybody was enjoying this Longbourn, but I'm also keeping an eye on the time, and so I think we have to move on to the
Yeah,
next
yeah.
one,
You'll
which
notice that when we do a tasting, we don't actually talk really in any detail about the liquid.
no,
Like, or certainly not what you're going to taste about it.
I,
I,
th- I,
I like to explain the thought process behind it and why we picked those casks and whatever else, because I think my own one of the things I love about whiskey is the diversity of it. And I like some of the more obscure stuff, and that kind of leads to what we're coming to next, isn't it? Is it Invergordon next?
it's in Vergorden, yeah, and I was going to say this is a whiskey that Jurgen has hyped me up on. He was talking about this. I haven't tasted it yet, although I have the open bottle here next to me, because this is something weird and wonderful. How would you
It's on the
explain?
fringes, I would say, and
Yeah,
I will not take it personally if some of you in this room do not like this whiskey, but there's so many things about this that just excite me and just make me really happy.
just to
Uh,
start with, it's actually not whiskey. It says
it's
high
not a
rye
whiskey.
Scottish spirit.
It's not a whiskey, and there's not many companies would be able to bottle this because you can't really say what it is very easily. It takes a level of knowledge of the rules of whiskey to understand what this actually is. So technically, I would describe this as a Scottish bourbon, so like an American bourbon whiskey. And what happened was Invergordon Distillery invited an American bourbon maker over to come to Scotland, work at Invergordon, and make them a Scottish bourbon. So it's a high rye mash. It's not a rye whiskey because a rye whiskey has to be 51%, but it's a high rye mash, wheat, corn, and barley. First virgin oak casks exclusively, and they said to him, make a whiskey exactly as you would make it in America, but make it here in a Gordon distillery. So they did that, and that was all fine and well. And then a few years into the project, somebody realized that
Hmm.
they had pitched enzymes during fermentation, and that's common practice in America because what that does, well, these grains, when you malt barley to make whiskey, the enzymes that naturally occur in that grain are being activated to convert the sugars, right? With maize and with wheat, and when you're not malting these things, you're not getting that same conversion. So to improve efficiency, they add naturally occurring enzymes to kind of convert more of the grain, right? So you get more alcohol. But that's forbidden completely in Scotch whiskey, not allowed. So you can't call it whiskey. You can't call it bourbon because it's made in Scotland. Can't call it whiskey because it's had enzymes pitched. And we were told this stuff we could send it to Spain in cask and we could call it European whiskey. And I'm like, well, why do I need to do that? Like LBD customers are nerds like us. They know the rules of Scotch whiskey. We can tell them what pitching enzymes is, and they understand that. Your average customer buying a bottle of Glenfiddich in the supermarket doesn't know what the hell's going on there. So you can't sell it to those people. But if you're a bit nerdy and you enjoy these things, then you can do it. So approach this through the context of an American whiskey. Don't think of it as a malt whiskey. Think of it as an American whiskey. Think of it as Scotland's effort in making a bourbon whiskey. We couldn't call it bourbon, but we've got these little biscuits called bourbon biscuits. So we put loads of bourbon biscuits in the label as a bit of a joke. I've got loads of photographs of this bottle at Invergordon Distillery. And then our supplier said, please do not post them. Because White and Mackay are a bit upset that their name's on the label because they're
Right.
embarrassed by this. And I was like, well, I'm sad to hear that because there's no reason to be embarrassed by this. It's
No.
super interesting. It's good in its own right, but it makes amazing old fashions and everything else, and they should be proud of it. They should own it. They should say, yeah, we made this, and it's quite cool that we tried.
Hmm.
And I don't think you should be embarrassed by it at all.
So
But
it's either a very young grain whiskey or a very or quite an old rye whiskey
yeah, you
or
think
something between that. Yeah, it's
like
7 years old
obviously
for
Scottish matured. So
yeah.
you're not talking about Rickenhouse and all these things like that. But like a lot of bourbons drink really, really well at three,
Mm.
4 years old. This is older than that. And it's not a grain whiskey in the true sense. So, like for me, drinking grain whiskey, I have a preference for older grains. I'm not a big
Mhm.
fan of younger grain whiskies. And I know that a lot of people are bottling younger whiskies and using more expensive wood to do that. But I don't think it works for me because we love malt whiskey because of the complexity and the texture and the depth. And grain whiskey by the nature of it and how it's distilled with a column
Oh my
distilled.
fucking god, dat is slecht.
Cool. I don't know what I said there, if it was bad or good or not.
I think somebody didn't like it, but I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, like I say, some of you will not like this. But column distilled whiskies it's much. It's not vodka. It's not fair to call it vodka, but it's much narrower profile, right? And you build complexity in grain by allowing it to oxidize and giving it refill wood to give it time and space to do that, so that the wood doesn't dominate. We've already talked all this sort of stuff, right?
Mhm.
Um, the But this has got a much more going on in the mash bill, and so you're getting a higher congener as well. So it's not a neutral spirit in the same way that a grain can be. Um, and we talk about congeners in whiskey. So like when you drink malt whiskey or malt spirit straight off the still, it's got a lot of flavor. It doesn't, it's not just ethanol. All those other compounds that are not ethanol, we call them congeners. So they're your esters and your fusel alcohols and your ethals and your amyls and everything else, right? So malt whiskey is very high congener, whereas grain whiskey isn't. This will be higher congener because of the mash bill. So like one of the things that draws us to Scotch whiskey, I think one of the reasons we get so taken in by it is that there are so many whiskies, and it's trying to understand the differences between them, and understand what we like and what we don't like and why that is. And it's something what really drew me in. I when I first started in whiskey, I was working in a whiskey bar. We had like 60, 70 whiskeys behind the bar, and some of the barmen didn't give a shit. You know, we had a lot of Americans came. It was a big castle, and they would just tell them anything about the whiskies. Whereas I really wanted to know if somebody's like, "What's a Lidgig like?" I could tell them, or "What's a Glenmorangie like?" and all these things like that. So that's what got me into it. And I think for a lot of us here, it's that exploration of whiskey. It's why we keep coming back to do tastings, to learn more, and to experience different whiskies that we haven't tried before. And some of us go a bit further into the fringes and then down the rabbit hole. And many of us it starts off, well, I like this. Maybe now I like refill sherry. Maybe I'm into peated whiskies now. Maybe I'm into world whiskies. And some of us go even further down that rabbit hole. So you start bottling obscure things that you can't call whiskey, and you go on your holidays to islands in the Arctic Sea to go and see a distillery where there's 12 people living in an island, and all that kind of mad stuff as well. So we did bottle a Cura a couple of years ago that was full maturation in cognac. It was 100% malted finished barley, double pot distilled. So, usually rye whiskey is not malted. Usually rye whiskey is column distilled. Usually rye whiskey is virgin oak, and usually it's American. So to go Finland malted, double pot still cognac, you got to be a bit of a nerd to get excited about that. But I was bloody excited about it, and I loved it. But it was a divisive whiskey. If you don't like rye whiskey, you're gonna fucking hate it. Doesn't matter how good it is, you don't like it. You don't like it. And so because my own excitement in whiskey is everything, I can't ever expect you're always going to love everything that I bottle, but I want you to understand why we did it. And there was a reason for it, and there was a thought process behind it. And in my last job as a vet, the key principle to being a vet, we call it evidence-based medicine. So everything you recommend, every medicine, surgery, procedure, there's science behind it, and you have to stand up in a court of law and argue why it was done. It has to be proved by experts. This is evidence-based whiskey. So there's a science to it, there's a thought process behind it, there's a meaning to it that we can feel we can stand up to it.
It's maybe a good question for somebody like you, who's like many people here in this session, deep into the rabbit hole of whiskey, and we've all tasted a lot of whiskey and experienced a lot of things. But do you find it harder and harder to be surprised by whiskey? Because this is a whiskey that surprises me, or this is a spirit that surprises me.
Every week I get a surprise. Like I love it. There's always something interesting happening, and I think it's why it's really hard to get bored of whiskey. And the biggest surprises always come when you're not expecting them. What I don't like is gimmick. What I don't like is seeing things being done just for the sake of them being done, and trying to just do something to shout louder than everybody else and get a bit of press for a minute. But what I do like is when really interesting things happen, and because of the area we're in, I've got a big thing for grain, and I love understanding how the way you grow a barley will make a different whiskey, and what the big manufacturers of whiskey don't like talking about is that, because it's the one thing they haven't got control over. They've got control over, they own their own cooperage, they own their own bodegas, they own their own distilleries and warehouses and bottling plant, but they don't own the farms that grow the barley. And although they say they maybe use Concerto or Optic or whatever else, they don't know that half the time, because barley is cyclical, and every 5 years what was grown isn't grown anymore, it's something else, because there's a new variety that's more disease resistant, or that variety you've grown for the last 10 years is now getting a disease, or the climate has changed, or whatever else. And we speak to farmers here, and they can tell you differences within individual fields and differences within parts of those fields. So of course it reflects differently on the whiskey. And so I love seeing things like Rassay doing their local barleys, and Arran, these things that the islands of Scotland, Shetland, Orkney, Rassay, these are the worst places to grow barley ever, right? They are shit places to grow barley, but you make a really interesting whiskey.
They are shit places. Point.
No, they're beautiful places, beautiful, amazing places. But we don't put the distilleries where they are because that's where the barley was. The distilleries always were there because that's where the water was, or that's where the transport was to get the grain and the coal and everything else to them. And nowadays they build a distillery because that's where they've got the spare outbuilding. you know. And so there's some couple of whiskey projects that I've been involved in the early stages and sunk them because no one's thought if they've got access to water or enough water to do it. The Gartbreck distillery in Islay still hasn't happened because they keep drilling salt water.
Mhm.
Anyway, there you
I
go.
th I think I think Andrew, it's very telling that on this whiskey that or this spirit that we're having right now, there's the most interaction on the chat
Yeah,
in all kinds of directions.
it's fun that though, isn't it? I mean,
It's
like
great fun. This,
we don't want to do a boring tasting. You don't be like, come and just drink things you've already drunk before.
yeah.
And if you found something you really like, fantastic. And if you don't like it, you got to experience it and you'll never drink it again. And that's fine. You know, you got to try it. And it's then something that you can reference because you'll remember this whiskey.
Hmm.
And you think you'll be drinking a whiskey 2 or 3 years from now and you think, God, that reminds me a wee bit of that mad Scottish bourbon that I had, you know,
Yeah,
on a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wednesday night, you know?
I was just wondering if this is the kind of whiskey that is comes into its own better if it's served blindly or with a little bit of explanation beforehand.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because like I don't want to skew people's
Hmm.
tasting, but I think if you put this to your nose and you're expecting a 12-year-old Glenlivet, you think something's gone badly wrong here.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what I was thinking
so
too. Yeah,
I think it's quite good to have that wee kind of like be ready, guys.
yeah.
You know,
This
and
is
I always
different.
like to
Yeah.
put this is a very strong flavored whiskey, so that tends to push it further down the list in a tasting. But I also like folk to have had maybe a couple of drams before they take it in anyway, just get you ready for it. They'd be a bit more willing. um, but
Don't know
yeah,
if you're happy with this tasting note. Retsina with old wet carton.
Barry, I thought you were a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I get quite a lot of earth, kind of like like minerally, kind
Yeah.
of petrichor kind of things. Resin that definitely, but I think that's again that's the virgin oak, and I think like bourbon is one of these things where like there's a lot of people are like they just live their lives for bourbon. They're just so excited about bourbon. They get excited about mash bills in the same way that I get excited about fermentation times. Um, but so many bourbons, despite what you do to them, it just dominated by virgin oak, you know. So I quite like sometimes when you go a wee bit into the higher rye because you're just getting a bit more spirit character, a bit of spice from that too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Just to be clear, so this is a small batch. Is there any left of this? Do they have more of this, or is everything bottled
yeah.
now?
Like I've got still some in tank of this one. So the reason this came about is obviously we do a bit of bottling for other people, and I had a guy who makes powders for barbecue and he makes amazing spices and all sorts of things like this. And he's making them in a boyne in Royal Deeside in Scotland. But he's so good at this. He's now got American pit masters, and he blends stuff specifically for their brand. And you think in America there'd be any number of people making this, but they come to Scotland to get it. And so he's quite into his Americana and so on. And he really wanted to bottle a bourbon, something that you could pair with a sausage and a rib or something, you know. And so I said to him, "Well, I can get you all these bourbons, but they're all aged bourbons, 10, 12, 15 years old, quite expensive." And his customers used to spending £5 or £6 on a wee tub of spice, not 50, 60, 70, 80, £100 on a bottle of whiskey. And it's certainly not a bourbon because you can buy Jack Daniels for €20 a bottle, you know?
Mhm.
It's not, I know we know that's not bourbon, but for many people, that's what they think it is. I was once on a train from Switzerland up to Hamburg, doing a little drive around Europe, and we were sharing a cabin with a couple of Danish chicken farmers who were right into their Harley Davidsons. And they had Harley Davidson everything, right?
That's it. That's
And
that's a good. It's a good start of a story. I was sharing
he's
a
like,
train
oh
with a
yeah,
couple of Danish chicken farmers.
yeah, and he's like, oh, you're Scottish, you like whiskey, and I went, yeah, I like whiskey, and he brought out a massive bottle of Jack Daniels, and I didn't really have the heart to tell him that was not really what I considered to be whiskey, but the else is pretty fussy. Um, but yeah, so we said get Scottish bourbon spirit, that we can't call it bourbon and we can't call it whiskey. But if you bottle it at 46%, it's going to be quite inexpensive and meet your budget, you know. So he was up for that. So we bought 2 IBCs worth of the stuff. So because I think there's quite a lot. I think if you do one run of the still at Invergordon, you're filling a lot of casks. Continuous still. You've got to get a certain volume to make that actually work. You're looking at big mash. So when Invergordon does an experiment, it's thousands and thousands of liters of spirit.
But that's good
Yeah.
news.
So we had to buy. That was the minimum order. We got that stuff. So we bottled. I can't remember how many bottles of this, but we've still got some in tank. But I think it's fun.
I love this kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can bring
Jürgen,
it
you
to a
you
tasting, and you can surprise people, and you can get them to try and guess what it is. They're not
yeah,
going to guess it was distilled at Invergordon Distillery.
yeah. Jürgen, you hyped it up for me and it completely delivered. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks for hyping it up.
Yeah. That's his job.
Yeah.
That's what he
I,
does.
I like weird stuff myself, which is great.
Yeah.
I also like American whiskey in general, so
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a few next to me here. I've got this, but it's not for me showing off, right? But it's so inside this bottle here, I've got some really cheap shit
Oh.
bourbon, and I like to pour it to people to test them, and they go, "Oh, that's amazing." I'm like, "Ha ha ha! You fell for the label."
All right. Yeah. All I've got on my desk is some Mexican whiskey.
Okay, I've
I
not
haven't
tried
had
that.
it yet, but I'd like to try it.
It's maybe a more limited edition now, given what's going on there at the moment.
Yeah, probably. Listen, it's 9:30.
Yeah, we should
Um,
keep going. Yeah.
we should keep going and go for the last whiskey of the lineup, which is the 22-year-old Bruichladdich.
Well, I think I would say Jurgen is spoiling you with this, and Huron, like wow, because I think what 3 bottles went to Belgium.
I've
Is
got
that
I've
right?
got I don't know, but I have opened one,
a
and
bit more,
that's
a bit more, a bit more.
Yeah. Oh, 6 bottles, wasn't it? 6 bottles, because there's two
Yeah,
cases
one
went.
case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So 6 bottles in the whole country. Um, yeah. I got sent a photograph of this bottle from Johan recently, who was standing in front of the picture. Um, but whiskey for me is more than just the science and the chemistry and all these things. That whiskey is a deeply, deeply personal thing, and you should never ever try to take the emotion out of whiskey. We talked about whiskey feeling different with friends or people or by yourself, whatever else, and that's because a lot of emotion goes into whiskey. And there's certain distilleries that you're going to have a connection with, or whatever else, or memories of. But Bruichladdich, this Bruichladdich is more sentimental to me for a couple of reasons. One, I've always loved Bruichladdich Distillery. It was my grandfather's favorite distillery, and I never got to meet him. So you always have that in your mind. So when I was 16, 17, 18 years old and I started drinking whiskey, I was like, I'm going to drink Bruichladdich. But this cask came from a friend of mine in Denmark. Some on the call know him very well, and the label for this is a painting by his grandfather, and it's actually the sand dunes in Denmark. But I thought they looked a bit like the sand dunes on Islay, and I just think this is absolutely stunning, stunning liquid. He let me taste this cask a wee while ago, and I was like, "You've got to give me this. You've got to let us bottle this. It's amazing." Um, and so I bought a parcel of casks off him just to get this one cask. That's how into it I was. And I paid a price for the casks, the whole parcel, and in my head I kind of thought, well, that one's worth that much, that one's worth that much, that one's worth that much. And we bottled this one, and we realized there was probably about a third less liquid in the cask than we had expected.
Oei.
So we'll have lost money on this, but I don't care. I think it's a stunning liquid. And can you see, Huron, in the bottle? Is there a wee bit of sediment at the bottom of the bottle? You've shaken it up now a wee bit, but there's yeah. So that when this settles, there will be a little bit of very fine black powder in the bottom, and that's bourbon cask
Yeah,
char.
there's a little bit there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't normally expect to have any sediment in the bottle, but this whiskey for me is all about the texture of it. It's so fatty, and when we bottled that, it was November or December last year. Super cold in the warehouse. We're in the northeast of Scotland. The coldest we've had it inside the warehouse was -26. The hottest it's been in the warehouse is +30. So I think we have quite a fast maturing warehouse. But it means that if it's -5, I think when we were in that day and we bottled that with a normal filter, even using a wide gauge filter, there's a risk that you end up chill filtering the whiskey and losing some of that texture. So we normally use a 5 micron filter, which would take away anything visible. We use a 20 micron filter, so you take away like hair or bits of cask chunk, But you're getting as close as you can get to just literally drinking the whiskey from the cask. Because there's something quite special about coming into a warehouse, opening up a cask and tasting it. I still get bloody goosebumps and I do it every feckin' day, you know? And sharing that with people and trying to give them that experience of the whiskey. And that cask was so good. I didn't want to do anything that would remotely risk losing that texture. And it's not something we'll do very often, but it just felt a bit fun to give you that experience as close as we could give you. I know that Robin, for many years of Blackadder, has got his raw cask stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right, I've bottled thousands of bottles of whiskey, right? I've never ever seen it that you get an equal amount of cask char in every single bottle. So, but there you go. But that is a genuine attempt at trying to give you that kind of experience. And it's everything I love about Bruichladdich. It's got that mad farmyard thing. It's really custardy. And this whiskey for me is all about texture. I, I I don't know if there's any left to buy. I know it's quite an expensive bottle, but I think it's super, super special. And I really, really hope you guys enjoy it tonight. When we started this was all about just giving samples of whiskey to friends and bottle splits and cask samples and sharing whiskey because I was like excited about the whiskey and wanted to share it with people. And it's still what we do now. It's still that feeling of like, wow, I really like this. I really hope you guys like it too. And so that's still a big part of what drives us, sharing whiskey. But yeah, I'm really glad that you guys managed to open a bottle and get to taste it.
I'm happy too. It's good
I wish I had
stuff.
some in front of me right now, but I don't.
Ah, yeah, well, there's a lot of silence in the chat about the whiskey. I think people are
So
still
they're still in the Invergordon.
they're still at the recording, yeah. So maybe while people are wrapping their heads around this dram and maybe sharing some tasting notes, what is in the future for you guys?
Yeah, so obviously because of the way that export works, there's always a wee bit of a delay. So and we were quite late getting back. I mean, it's really great to see Jan on the chat tonight. Jan's been a friend for many, many years and took in some bottles of ours on a few occasions, and was actually talking to a few folk about getting us some proper exposure into Belgium. Um, we were also talking to guys at High Spirits who Jurgen works with in the Netherlands, and so coming into Belgium again was kind of like a happy accident for us. We didn't realize it was happening until it was happening, but I was so delighted that it's with Jurgen. Um, so there's always a wee bit of a delay with what comes to you guys. But we've just bottled our next releases and we're waiting on the labels for those. And I'm quite excited about a number of those whiskies. So we've got and these will come to you eventually. Got a Glenrothes, 17-year-old 2008. That was probably like the second or third cask that we bought as Little Brown Dog. So we've had it for quite a long time. Now I feel it's at the point where we're going to bottle it. The label for that one is like red sock material because I cannot distinguish Glenrothes from Ronnie Cox, Ronnie Red Sox. The man is Glenrothes. He's an absolute wonderful, wonderful man. He's got the best whiskey stories in the history of whiskey. If I live a life as 10% as exciting as his, I'll be very happy. Great guy. We've got a not secret Speyside. So from the not secret Speyside distillery, in a refill sherry cask, 15, 16 years old. We've got a full maturation in white port Breval, which is just stunning. Stunning stuff. Really interesting. And again, because I'm a sentimental, get one of the very first, well, the very first Little Brown Dog labeled bottle was an Arran that I put into a white port cask and shared with a few people. So it's nice to do a full maturation white port. And we've got an Ardlayer, unpeated Ardmore, that we put into a cognac cask. So we bottled the cognac a year and a bit ago. Beautiful, beautiful 30-odd-year-old cognac, black as Pepsi. And then we put the Ardlayer into that. That's actually been in two different casks, that cask. It was originally a refill hogshead. It arrived to us from another warehouse. And again, this is one of the reasons why we have our own warehouse. It arrived to us, it lost 10 litres of liquid on the journey from that warehouse to us. A band had snapped. And because it's probably in a rack of 1,000 casks, no one would have noticed. Whereas with our warehouse, we could see the leaks, we can act on it, you know? So it ended up in a bourbon barrel, and then just to kind of rescue it. And then it went into the cognac for a year, and it's really fruity and just really interesting stuff. With that oiliness you get from Ardmore without the peat. And I'm trying to remember the last one. There's something else. And then we're doing a collaboration with Living Souls. So we've made a blend. Those guys are Glasgow based. We're Aberdeenshire based. So we've combined 1970s Glengarries with some really old grains from the Central Belt, from closed distilleries. 46 years old in the bottle at cask strength. It's just fruity gorgeousness. So look forward to getting that out too. So that's what you'll see in the future. And then just there's always cask in the warehouse you're excited about. So we've got some Ballandala, some Aberlour, some unpeated Kalila that I'm really excited about. So yeah, we're gonna have some fun.
Maybe for the people who are traveling to Scotland in the near future, can we visit?
Yeah, it's quite funny because like we don't really have a visitor centre or anything like that at all, and technically we're not
No,
really
but your
close to
office
shore. But
seems perfect for accommodating. So
well, this is my house, but yeah, you
yeah.
can come here. Like, yeah, we Chris always laughs at me because despite that, anyone that asks, I'm like, yeah, come and visit. I think if you're going to make if you're going to make the effort to come all the way from Belgium, then you definitely deserve to come and round and have a wee dram. And Johan, you've been, haven't you? So we've now got a toilet. We didn't used to have a toilet. We used to have to go up to Chris's house if it was serious. But we had these guys. This will be the last story, so you can go back to your beds, right? But we had these guys from Taiwan that wanted to come and visit, and they were looking at taking on lots of Scottish brands. And so a lot of the guys, other brands, were really pushing the boat out, giving these guys the red carpet treatment. And we don't have the budget for that, or really the inclination. And so they had spent the night at Glen Eagles, one of the most prestigious hotels in Scotland, and they'd been put up there by another whiskey company. And they got on the train up to Inverurie, and I picked them up in my 13-year-old Volkswagen Golf that's got a deer-shaped dent in the side of it, and took them up via the local bakery to get them a sandwich and a takeaway coffee. And we got up to the distillery, and the guy's like, "Where's your toilet?" And before I could say, "Well, we haven't got one here, but there's one up at the house if you want to go up to the house," Chris said, "Oh, it's a farm, just pee over there." So, like, they've gone from Glen Eagles to pissing in a farm, and we got the contract.
Yeah,
They got the authentic Scottish hospitality experience there, you know.
that's perfect. Yeah,
But they're good guys, good guys. But if you come to visit me now, we've got a toilet. You don't have to pee in the farm. It's fine.
I think you should put it on the website. We have a toilet now.
We have a toilet now. It's
Yeah.
also quite funny because it's Chris isn't Scottish. He's English. He moved up to Aberdeenshire 20 odd years ago from Shropshire. But I put the toilet door is an old front door because we buy everything second hand. Because I would much rather spend the money on casks than a fancy new door for a toilet. So we got a door off Facebook Marketplace for like 10 quid, but it had a letterbox, and you don't really want a letterbox on your toilet door. So I got a wee sign up that just folk knew it was a toilet to put over the hole, and it just says "cludgy," which is a Scottish word for toilet. So I was like, "What is cludgy?" Like, you don't need to worry, you know. Yeah. Our most prestigious part of our distillery is our fire doors came out of the Macallan distillery. So there you
Okay.
go. That's about as highbrow as we get. We got their second-hand doors and
Yeah.
spray painted.
And since you have them, you add it to your prices, of course.
Yeah, you have to book an appointment to open the door
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pay a
Yeah.
small fee. Yeah.
I think you'll have some visitors from the people in the session here in the future.
Well, if you want to come and visit, just send me a message. So if you message on the website or you message through Facebook or Instagram, whatever, it's me you'll speak to. There's two of us in the company, and Chris and myself, but I do all the messages. But just message, make sure that
Yeah, yeah,
we're
of
going to be
course.
about, and I'm not somewhere else. We're about to get our first member staff next month, which I'm quite excited about. So Alex is coming to work with us. She's done all of our designs for our labels since we started. So we tell her what we want and she makes it happen. But she's now going to come work with us 3 days a week in the office. And we've got Megan that works remotely and does some of our warehouse licensing forms and our export documents as a kind of contractor. But we're a small company. We just like making good whiskey, and I hope you guys have had some fun tonight. Don't expect you've learned anything, but maybe you've had some fun, and hopefully you've enjoyed the jams.
I think both Andrew, we both learned stuff. We did some nerdy stuff. We had some surprising experiences, some surprising tasting experiences, and we had some well, a lot of fun. At least I had. If there's any last questions, guys, now's the moment, because otherwise I'm going to officially close the official part of the tasting. Barry has to leave.
Good to see you, Barry. Take care.
But if there's no more questions, Andrew, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us and for taking all the time to create these great whiskies and slash spirits. Because yeah, and as I said in the beginning, I'm very happy to have Little Brown Dog in Belgium on the market, and I hope to see a lot more of this. So Jurgen, you know what to do.
Now, you guys have been good fun, so thanks very much. And to say, if anyone's got any questions, you're very welcome to ask them.
Okay. I'm going to close the official part of the tasting, but everybody please just hang on for 1 more minute because I've got something extra to say after I've closed off the session. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and see you next time.